All right. Well, welcome to today's client connection. As I have Pamela Sams joining me today, and I'll introduce her in just a minute, but as we were just joking about, Zoom continues to surprise and confound at least me. I can't figure out how to turn Pamela's camera on. So if I can figure that out during this, I'll turn it on. Otherwise, we will just proceed with your lovely headshot there.
Yep.
And everybody will just have to look at me. So apologies for that. But without further ado, Pamela has been in the financial and wealth planning field for 19 years. Her education and training and they help her clients successfully navigate through a myriad of financial decisions they face during their lives. She focuses on helping her clients meet their financial needs and to help them work to achieve financial security and greater retirement readiness. Pamela has become a strong voice in the area of personal finance for women. Her knowledge in this area has made her a sought-after speaker, and she has been quoted in articles in various financial publications. So welcome, Pamela.
Thank you for having me, Tom. And I know it's always these technical difficulties, but we'll muddle through.
That's right. So anything else you want to add to your introduction? Did I cover it all?
I think you covered it all.
Okay, well, great. Well, I'm thrilled to have you with us today because you do focus on, I mean, obviously you can provide advice to anybody, but you do particularly focus on financial services advice for women and the unique challenges that they face. And so today we're going to be talking about a number of different items that impact our clients, those people who've been fired or afraid that they might be. And we're going to rely on your expert advice to teach us what are best practices for folks who find them in this sort of unfortunate circumstance. So I know we're planning to start with how to, if you haven't been fired yet, but you're afraid you might be, how you start to get your financial house in order. So you want to start with that?
Yeah, exactly. With anything, if you have your financial affairs in order, anticipating a potential financial loss or all of a sudden a financial loss, knowing exactly how your household is run financially is the best case scenario that you can achieve for yourself. So really making sure you know all of the ins and outs, what all of your expenses are. I always tell people to start with a budget. I use it as a bad B word because a lot of times people don't like the term budget because they think it's more of a being deprived of something, and it's nothing like that. It's really how do you effectively secure what's going on in your household and not overspend. So, with the anticipation of a job loss, you need to know exactly where every dollar is going in your household, just in case, because, if you have a reduction of income, you need to know what bills are going out, what bills are what I call the necessities, the needs, and then those that are wants, and then separating those out. I usually go through an exercise with my clients. It's kind of a T chart. It's an old famous tool that Ben Franklin used to make decisions, kind of what are the pros and cons. In this instance, it would be kind of what are the needs and wants in your household. The things that you need, of course, food, shelter, transportation are at the top of that list, but everything else would be into the wants category. Of course, you need your utilities, but are there things that could be reduced or eliminated from your budget, especially if you're going to be in a situation where you're not going to be bringing in the same level of income with a job loss or a job reduction in your salary. So that's first off with getting your financial house in order, is understanding your income and your resources there. Same thing with credit card debt. How much do you have in debt obligations, loans, credit cards, all of those things. And of course, as you anticipate or maybe have a situation where a job loss is coming, know ahead of time how to deal with creditors. Say, hey, I'm going to have a reduction of income. Are there things that I can be doing now, or are there things that would cover, maybe a waiver of payments or something like that? So knowing exactly how your household runs and getting that in financial order really helps in an anticipation of a reduction of income and or possible job loss.
Great. Now that's perfect. My assistants tell me you should be able to turn your camera on now. I don't know if you're
Okay,
seeing the option for that.
let's see. Still not letting me.
Still
Oh,
not,
so
still
no,
not letting you.
no.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, before I comment on that excellent advice, for those people who aren't going to be able to watch to the end of this, can you let people know how they could get in touch with you?
Mhm. Yes. My website is www.jacksonsams.com. My firm is Jackson Sams Wealth Strategies. So that's where the Jackson Sams come from. It is not two people. It's just myself and is a small boutique firm with myself and a couple of assistants. But the Jackson comes from my maiden name because I did start my practice out of really helping my mom transition to becoming a widow after my father passed away. So I kept the Jackson in honor of my dad, because this is really how I got started in the financial services. So they can reach me there. And then also I'm on Facebook. If anybody is on Facebook, at Jackson Sams Wealth is where you would find me on Facebook and Instagram if people are doing social media. And of course, Pamela at jacksonsams.com is my email if people want any additional information to fill questions that they may not have got answered in our session today.
No, that's great. So tell me a little bit more about how you got started in the business. You said you started with helping your mom, kind of get her financial house in order. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so when my dad passed away in 2001, shortly after 9/11. So 9/11 was a challenging year. 9/11, 2001. Of course, the world changed, but my world changed as well 5 days later when I found out my dad was sick and possibly would pass away. So frantically, I got on a plane to get to St. Louis. That's where I'm originally from. I got a chance to spend 2 beautiful weeks with him before he had passed away. Um, you know, Coming from a household where my dad took care of most of the household finances. My parents are part of an older generation where that's how it happened, is that men took care of the household finances. And then, I'm not going to say my mother was totally in the dark with her finances, but that level of, I did a presentation yesterday about women being CFOs of our own households, to the extent where we know what's going on budget wise, expenses, but may not have that next level of education where it's the investment piece and things like that. So that's where my mom was left with my dad passed away. So really helping her understand what her resources were when my dad left her, Social Security, his partial of his pension, and then really how to effectively be financially sound in light of in the absence of my dad. With that, I had just finished the financial management MBA a year prior, thinking I was going to go into investment banking because that's where the money is. But God had a different purpose for me, and so it was kind of an intersection of providence that I would happen to have that background to be able to really step up and help my mom.
Yeah, that's a fantastic, fantastic origin story. And your mom was lucky to have you there to be able to help her out. It's funny how life sometimes, changes her plans. You think you're heading in one direction, something happens, you're like, oh no, I'm meant to go this way. And we're all the better for it that you chose this path. Because there are plenty of people in the banking financial services sector. We need more folks like you out there. So let me ask you this one comment, just in terms of people that are in place facing employment issues, which of course the people that we see, is to keep in mind from the legal aspect. There is usually time, right? Like at least in order to protect your claims, in most states, you have at least 180 days, sometimes as long as 300 to a year, before you have to file anything, if you indeed need to file anything. So I think a lot of people we see, they get in a panic and they're so focused on the employment issue and what's going on with them and how they're being wronged, which of course makes sense. It's a really disruptive sort of thing to happen to you, but they neglect other areas. They feel like they can't, for example, like I'm sure some people would be thinking, I don't have time to do a financial plan. I don't have a time to kind of tease this out. But the truth is, at least from a legal perspective, you do. So it's really important to be talking with your lawyer. Obviously, they're not your financial advisor, but just to get a sense of what the timing is, you know, because you may be able to hand the problem off to your lawyer's working on it, and then you as the client take a deep breath. You know, you're working with somebody like Pamela, you know, to kind of help you get your financial house in order. You know, because that's useful. I mean, what's the saying? You know, the best time, the first best time to start that was 10 years ago. The second best time to start it is right now, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to start where you are. And even if you're not certain your job's going to continue, at least start that process. Pamela, can you, and I'm sure you see this quite often, can you kind of speak to, I think, I mean, which is a certain kind of mindset that I've had is like, you know, my finances are such a complicated mess that it's just like, I just want to close the closet door. You know, like when you clean up your house, you shove everything in the closet, you close your door and you pretend like it's clean. You know, you just don't even want to open that door because there's just shame and guilt. And, you know, can you talk a little bit about that and what you see with your clients?
Yeah, I get that a lot. You know, that was part of the presentation I did as well yesterday. What I call there's kind of 5 personality types when it comes to finances, and the one you just described would be financial avoider, who just wants to kind of bury their head in the sand and just close that door and not deal with it. You know, but recently I took on a client, actually last week, and you know, she was actually in a job loss situation, and she said, and a job loss situation and coming from a divorce. So she kind of had the double whammy, and she
Yeah, I always think that.
understood, you know, her, you know, and you know, to use the word she came to me with was, my finances are a hot mess. I know I need help in this, and I'm willing to, you know, I need a whole financial makeover with that. So really just coming to the conclusion that, yes, I do need to open up the door. I really need to start looking at it, and then really being able to solicit the advice of a trusted advisor to kind of help you slowly open that door so everything doesn't pile off on you, because that's what happens a lot of times when people deal with their own finances. It becomes an overwhelming situation, not knowing where to start, but really working with a trusted professional that will be able to help you with those baby steps to, you know, put your toe in the water, keep going, give you that encouragement to really pick apart the pieces you need to, and then really put together. You know, it's just like with Legos. If you were to use that example, is that you start with one building block and then you put another one on, you put another one on. Next thing you know, you have a whole castle that you've built. And that's why the way that I approach people who are in that situation is that we all only start where you are. There's no judgment, no shame on what happened before. We take you where you are now, and then really how do we move forward with those building blocks to build you up financially.
Got it. No, I think that's exactly right. And I think also correlated to that, it's like, it's never too late, right?
Mhm.
Like you got, you know, you start it now, you got time to get that snowball rolling in the right direction. And I don't think, you know, feeling like, oh, I'm too over the hill or I'm too late in my life to do this. That's almost never that's almost never correct. Am I right about that? You
That's
know
correct.
better than I, Pamela.
Yeah, I mean, because you know, it's that thing about, you know, people are, well, I don't want to go back to school, or I don't want to do this. The time is going to pass away anyway, regardless.
Yeah.
So you might as well go ahead and put the things in order that you need. You know, so it's never too late, if you know, to put away some dollars, really reevaluate what you may be doing, maybe go back to school, maybe learn some, you know, new skills in order to get yourself into a position that may be paying a little bit more, especially after a job loss. I know a lot of times people feel that, you know, ashamed of being either let go or being fired. But sometimes that's the actual catalyst that will start you to reevaluate. Maybe I need to be doing something else to make more money, retool myself, and then you may end up in a better situation than you were previously. But you needed to have that kind of that moment, where defining moment where this happened to you. Yes, you can, you know, have your pity party moment for a while, but you need to get yourself up and then really get yourself up financially, and also make sure you start getting your life together, your career, if you need to retool, and then maybe find something better opportunity for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's so important that sometimes, you shut the closet door and you're afraid to open it, but when you open it, it's not as bad as you thought, right? You're like, oh, okay, I'd kind of built this up in my mind as like, this is a huge mess. Uh, but we see that happen, of course, through the services we provide our clients that, this really bad event happens and you're focused on it, but when you kind of bring the lens out a little bit, you'll see that there are other opportunities, even better ones. Um, so if you can just get to that point, take that deep breath, dive in, often you'll get, yes, there may be some unpleasant surprises, but often there will be some pleasant surprises too. Like you just said, Pam, like maybe you look at it with a financial advisor and you decide, okay, there is enough money here for, there are options for me to go back to school or, choose a different career path, whatever it may be, particularly now, with a stronger job environment, folks have more options than they did, certainly, certainly during the pandemic. So there often can be a bright spot on the horizon.
Exactly.
And my assistant is telling me that if you leave the meeting and rejoin, you might be able to start your camera. I don't know if you want to try that or not.
I think that's a little risky. So
Okay, all right, we'll just keep going. Fair enough. And just one thing I wanted to circle back on, which I think was an important point that you made with creditors. There's often, they have a lot more flexibility than you may think.
exactly.
Because creditors, yes, of course, if they needed to, and they could, they could, go for default, try to sue you for it. And of course, they have the legal right to collect on the debt, but that's very expensive. So I'm not saying they're good people, although I'm sure they're good people who are creditors, but it's not they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart. It's that it would be very difficult and expensive for them to chase you down. And so a lot of times creditors, particularly if you're upfront with them, and you call them proactively and let them know, like, we've had to do it with our business, and we've had, like, we're looking forward, like, hey, we're going to have a bottleneck, at this point, calling our banker or calling our creditors and saying, hey, look, like, we don't know this is going to happen, but it may be. And to your point, Pamela, can we skip a month? Can we do a reduced payment? And 9 times out of 10, they're gonna work with you.
Exactly. But you hit it on the head, Thomas, that you said be proactive. That's the thing that you want to make sure you get done. You don't want to ignore or not answer the phone calls because
Exactly.
your collectors or creditors are calling you. You want to make sure you let them know ahead of time so you can have a payment arrangement or work something out with them versus avoiding them.
Yeah.
So that's the key, is to be proactive in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move to our second topic. Let's talk about equity, severance, and the like. So where would you like to start there?
And what I mean there is, there's, especially if people have been in a job situation a while, there may be, stock options involved. It may be, paid time off that you accumulated that you didn't use. So that I count that as equity that's built up in yourself inside of that particular job. So, what is that going to look like after a job loss, or if you have a reduction in your hours or something like that? What is still owed to you? Of course, the pay time off is, but do you get a chance to take your 401k? I know we're maybe hopping ahead, but we'll talk a little bit about that more in depth. But are you vested? Will you get a severance to really float you for maybe several months while you get yourself back up on your feet? So really knowing all of the things that are provided to you in that job situation, that if you have either a loss or reduction of hours, what is still owed to you, so in advance how to move accordingly with that. So if you get paid time off, pay time off. I had, a lot of clients that work for the federal government, and, they get a lot of leave, they get sick and they get, annual leave. So, I have a couple of clients who just recently retired, and she had 2 years of PTO that, transferred into dollars. So what would that equity look like for someone who was about to experience a job loss with not taking paid time off? How is that going to be provided to you? Is it going to be in your final check? Or are you going to get a lump sum? Same thing with the severance. How long is that going to last? How much is going to be? What benefits are you going to cover for me during that time period? So knowing what the equity is and also the severance options that you have in face of a potential job loss, or you decide to move on as well, knowing what is owed to you at the end of that job.
Yeah, I think that's very important. And just on the legal side of it, um, PTO is an important one. It's a good point that federal sector folks have a lot more rights in those areas than private sector folks. If you're in a private sector job, you want to look at the company policy. Depending on what state you're in, they're not required by law to pay you out PTO, unless that is the company practice where there's a contractual arrangement for them to pay that out. But they should be able to tell you that. You might look in your handbook. That might be a place to start, although you wouldn't necessarily limit it there, because sometimes companies don't actually follow what's in their handbooks. So if the company has a practice of paying out PTO, then you would be owed it as well. And so knowing how that's going to be paid out is important. And to the point about the severance, I think, and this is sort of the piece that we provide, and this is going to go out to all of our clients. So that's kind of preaching to the choir. But that's where you need legal counsel to come in and look at it and value. I mean, it's sort of a crude way to talk about it, but it really is sort of an asset that you have when you're talking about your equity. If something has been done to you that is illegal or even potentially illegal, that's where we come in to the company. And it folks, they just don't even, they go, they're glad to have it, but it's not front of mind for them. And so when you're leaving a job, if there's been a profit sharing pool, checking when that vests and make sure, like you said, like it's still your money. You can leave it with the company and it will remain in those investment vehicles, but you may prefer to, to take it with you and roll it over into a separate account. The other thought I had was just because we had this happen with another client recently, if she was eligible for Medicare, and so she rolled off her company plan into Medicare, which can be a great solution too.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you're at that the age of 65 for Medicare, that's an easy fix for your health insurance. Is really the employer plan, or if you have job loss and you're not going to be with that employer anyway, then Medicare would be that option. It people who age into Medicare at age 65 as well. But back to what you were talking about with the retirement plans. Usually, young people, they enroll in it. Now they have, most employers will have auto enrollment, so you would have to opt out versus opt in, really to give the opportunity for people to invest into a retirement program without having to think about enrollment. But that being said, is that a lot of times it'll accumulate, and young people feel, there's 30 or 40 years out for retirement, they'll end up cashing it out. I see a lot of young people who, leave jobs, and then they end up, cashing out a 401k or their retirement plan, figuring they can make it up at some point in time. But there's so many penalties involved. Of course, number one, you have to, pay the early withdrawal penalty if you're under 59 and a half, and then you have to pay tax on the income that would, generate. So if it's, $10,000, you have $10,000 of income that year, and you pay 10% early withdrawal penalty on that $10,000. So, really encouraging people, if you at some point make a decision, but either you leave it at the employer or you roll it over into your own individual IRA. Never, unless it's exact. I always tell people, exactly an emergency situation, perhaps, but try not to cash out your retirement plans.
Yeah, right. It's not found money. I think in your younger days, you're right. You think you're invincible and you're going to be able to make it up, but just roll it over and you'll save yourself a ton of money. And you didn't know it was there anyway, so just pretend like it's not there and roll it over into something else, or just let it stay there and accumulate. That brings me to kind of circling back on the point about severance. And I mean, I think this is why it's so important to have this whole picture figured out, kind of services that you provide, knowing what your healthcare situation is going to be, knowing what your financial outlook, what your needs versus wants and how long you can make it, because that will affect if you have hired an attorney or thinking about it or trying to do it on your own, how big that severance offer needs to be from the employer for you to make it work. And because most people aren't in this for the money, right? I mean, they're not, they'd like to get this resolved and they'd like to move on to something better. They're not interested in, of course, they'd rather get more rather than less, but they prefer to take what they can get now, as opposed to fighting it, and try to expand that pie, which also can happen. I don't want to say that it can't, but it's a bit of a riskier strategy. And if you've got your just for instance, if you were thinking in your mind, well, I'm going to have to pay Cobra, for this health insurance, is how much it's going to cost. And then you find out you're eligible for Medicare, or that you can go through the ACA and it's not going to be as painful a transition as you thought. Well, then that's off the table for the money you're trying to replace with the severance. And so all of a sudden your severance needs go from this to this, which make it a lot easier to get it done quickly. So just something to keep in mind as those two kind of interplay. Another thing to consider with the healthcare is this is another area of negotiation. There are, employers, get dollars in your pocket is the most difficult thing to get. I mean, you can get it. I mean, we do it quite frequently, but dollars in your pocket is the most difficult thing to get from the employer. Everything else on the periphery is usually you've got more wiggle room with the employer. We talked about the non-competes. Healthcare is another one. It's not an automatic for the employer, but a lot of times they can keep you on their plan for a time, can offer you to pay your Cobra premiums. That can be another area of negotiation for you.
Mhm.
Because there are all kinds of ways to work out a severance. You know, if you want to keep because once you've separated from the company, often you can't be on the plan. Almost always you can't be on the plan.
Correct.
But there are severance agreements where the company will keep you on, you know, just for a technical matter. They'll call you an advisor or something like that, and you'll get a certain amount of, you know, you're on your regular payroll cycle. You're still getting paid, but you're not working. They're not working. You're out of the. You've escaped. They're not coming after you. You know, you're not having to work every day. You are essentially on your own, but you're still drawing that paycheck. And just as importantly, you're still in that healthcare plan. So
Right.
that's another area to think about, you know, when negotiating these severances, is how much is the healthcare important or other benefits important to you? And, you know, would keeping them alive for a certain amount of time be more important to you than getting kind of a lump sum payment?
Exactly. And, to that point, especially, families with healthcare, you have the kids on, you have the spouse
Yes.
on. That's a big benefit because, having Cobra individually and then let alone trying to put other people on it can be a really big dollar amount out of your budget. So if you can finagle a way in a severance package to have either maybe a portion of the premium subsidized through the employer, or cover you for a certain period of time before you're able to get on ACA or perhaps Medicare if you age into it. But people think health insurance, but it's a costly amount for those premiums, which, like you said, Tom, equates into real dollars.
Yeah.
That if you don't know what your expenses are on a monthly basis, going back to what to ask for. Same thing with I help people with salary negotiations. You need to figure out what is your household income situation look like. How much do you need to bring into the household? That's how much you need to ask for salary. Same thing with the severance. But knowing what your financial house looks like prior to that is the key. So
Yeah.
you won't end up lowballing yourself and then, go back and say, oh, I forgot, I had this expense, or I forgot I would need to incorporate this expense into it. And now, like you said, once you sign those docs, you're on the hook and that's what you get. So making sure you have that financial picture, working either on your own or with your financial advisor to get that prior to you leaving the employer when the severance is either presented to you or you're working with yourself, Tom, on exactly what do you need to ask for. At least you'll have some understanding of what your needs are.
Yeah. Yeah. And also just to circle back on you often have more time than you think,
Mhm.
even if, you've got, because we see people that come to our office not infrequently, they're like, hey, HR is calling me. They want to have a meeting tomorrow. What do I do? Even if things go really sideways and you get, let's say, terminated at that meeting, there's nothing you could have done about it, in the 24
Mhm.
hours beforehand, that was going to happen.
Yeah.
But B, you've got time. You've got, as a legal matter, you have time. You've got, like I said, either 180 or 300 days before you have
Mhm.
to file a charge to protect your claim. So it's not as if you have to get it resolved right then. It's not as if you have to send the demand letter out right then. You can take a deep breath. You can look at your finances. And even concurrently while you're looking for counsel or considering that option. So, if you need, if you need to take a month, you need to take 2 months, to kind of get this figured out and make sure that you're putting your best foot forward. Often as a legal matter, you have that time. Of course, always better to talk to a lawyer, make sure that's the case. There are some claims that have a very short window.
Mhm.
Some as little as 30 days, some 45, particularly if you're in the federal government, you got 45 days to file
Mhm.
an EEOC,
Yep.
or file with your EEOC officer, which is not a difficult thing to do, but you don't want to let that time period pass. So talk to a lawyer, figure out what the time frame is that you need to take an action, and then, take a deep breath, do the crying that you need to cry, go see your therapist, whatever it is you need to do, and then turn to your finances, figure out what's there, what's the state of play, and then you can go back and say, okay, this is what I need for my employer to make this right.
Mhm. Exactly. And I think, with anything, as humans, we're reactive. And so we just think everything is on a fast time pace and we have to make decisions right away. Same thing with anything going through, divorce or becoming a widow or losing your job. It's in that moment where all of these emotions come and you have a lot of decisions to make. We sometimes do not step back to say, hey, let me just kind of clear my head and then really make a sound financial decision prior to doing that, because we're just such in panic mode at that particular point in time. But as you were explaining, Tom, knowing the timeline on when you need to make decisions on things so something won't slip through the cracks, or making a hasty decision right there, especially, employers are kind of waiting for you to not to say that they're, unscrupulous, but they're waiting for you to slip up in some capacity.
Sure.
And not knowing what your legal rights are to ask for, and then maybe not knowing the time frame to make these decisions, and maybe hastily trying to help you make a decision right away on something. Just make sure you take that freeze moment to say, I need to seek legal counsel. I need to either consult my financial advisor, whatever the case may be, consult your professionals, and then, step back and then make a solid decision from there.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. Yeah, another thing about employers is, even when sometimes they are unscrupulous, but even when they're not being unscrupulous, I mean, they put forward what's best for them.
Correct.
Right. And maybe not even trying to get an advantage over you, but they're like, they want it resolved. They want it done quickly. They want the document signed, they want to move on. And they're putting forth a package that is best for them. And with that, just because they don't know your situation, they don't know what would be the best payout for you or the best, insurance solution. So it may not be they're trying to get one over on you. It's just they're doing what they do, which is trying to advantage the company. So it really does, even if you can't change in a significant way the parameters of the severance agreement, whatever the terms are, at least knowing what they are and what the impact is on you, because there usually is, even for the hardest nosed employers, there often is a tweak here or tweak there that they'd be willing to make, to make the severance even marginally better for you, even if it's only just in the terms of the payout, because those can also have implications. So, fight for every little advantage you can get.
Exactly.
All right, Pamela, one final question for you. What about 401ks? When is it appropriate, or would you say is an option to kind of break the glass and use that money? Let's say you're in, a legal fight and you need to access those. My understanding is you can borrow as long as you pay it back in a certain amount of time. Is that right?
If you are currently with your employer, you can borrow. Once you leave, that option's off the table, and you can take a withdrawal from it, or you can roll it over and then maybe perhaps borrow from your from your IRA to do it. Still going to be some penalties unless there's some things in the law that you're able to take it. Severe health care cause, first-time home buyers. There's some other caveats that you can take it without the early withdrawal penalty. But for the most part, like you said, cracking that the nest egg prior to 59 and a half really involves a lot of penalties. So if there's other go-to of pots of money that you can go to without affecting your retirement plan, that's usually what I recommend as well. One of the things that, if you do end up in a situation where you do have to take it, roll it over to an IRA prior, because based on the ERISA laws that you were talking about before, the employer is obligated to hold 20% for taxes and then give you the rest of that money. You're gonna get it back at the end of the tax season, but just know there's going to be a big reduction of 20%, then the penalty of 10% before you even get any of those dollars. So you can circumvent the 20% if you roll it into an IRA first. Still going to pay the 10% early withdrawal penalty, but at least you'll eliminate that 20% that the employer is obligated to hold for the IRS on your behalf for that account.
Yeah, so maybe the two better options would be for those who own their home and have equity in it, which, good news for those who own homes these days, the prices are going up. Home equity loans probably better, right? You don't you want to be a little careful with it, but you're going to get generally pretty good rates. Another option is for those who have access to family and friends who might be willing to loan you some of that money. I forget what the number is, but there's a certain amount they can gift now.
Yeah,
It's a 50,000, is that right?
15 or 16,000
Yeah.
that you can gift, for that. So that's a possibility. But again, Tom, that's kind of the benefit of either working with a financial professional to know those options on where you can tap into pools of money without penalty. And then also, not cracking that nest egg if you don't have to. So it gives you a variety of different options or choices or solutions that you can come up with versus, most of the time, like we were talking about before, people think your 401k is kind of that money, especially if you put money in and you get a match, that is kind of found money that, I can make it up eventually. And then they end up cracking their nest egg sooner, but it has so many penalties involved with doing so. There may have been a better solution, like you said, either home equity line of credit or home equity loans, perhaps, like you said, borrowing money as a gifting strategy. For that, maybe you have a cash reserve or emergency fund that you can tap into as well. So knowing where all of those pools of money as options for you, if you need it in a situation where you're going through, a legal fight in this employment situation, knowing where all of those pools of money may be, so you know which ones to tap and then which ones to try to leave alone and use only in emergency situations.
Yeah, no, I think that's very, very important to consider. And I had a thought and now it has escaped me. Oh, I know. These tend to be rare, but we do occasionally see them, that there are companies that will loan money to people with legal claims. Basically, you're borrowing against what you believe you will recover. Sort of like breaking the nest egg. I mean, they can be, we've seen them that are pretty good loans, particularly ones. And let me say, this tends to be one where you have a possibility of recovery. And in a lot of employment law cases, you don't. If you're being sued for a non-compete, if you're trying to get an accommodation, all of the things these are very important legal issues to resolve. But they're not going to result in a payout. So these would not be an option for those folks. But if you've been wrongfully fired and you've got a claim that you can recover on, there are companies out there that will loan you money against it. Then what happens is they'll contact your lawyer and they'll ask, what do you think the value of this claim is? And then they make they have their own team review it, and then they make a decision about what it's worth, and then they'll loan you money. Couple of things to look out for that is probably would not be a surprise to you, Pamela. It's a pretty high interest. I mean, like you're taking a little bit now and giving up a lot, potentially a lot later, which is their business model. There are some, like we had this a number of years ago, fairly rare, but there are some you want to look for no recourse loans. So if they loan you the money and then you lose your case, then you're not on the hook. And we had a case where, the woman got a $5,000 loan. It was a good case. But for various reasons, she ended up getting no payout. And so that, the company that made the loan didn't collect and they didn't come after her for the money. So again, it's a small pool of cases, but it's something when you're talking to your financial advisor and talking to your attorney to consider. In limited instances, it can make good sense. But as often is the case, the devil's in the details. You want to make, you want to look at what the terms of that loan are, and be in close contact with your attorney too. And this brings up another point, when you're looking at an employment claim, for those where there is a possibility of payout, and I'd say about at least half, maybe more of the cases we see are like that. Again, those cases where you've been wrongfully fired or you're still at work, but you're being significantly harassed and there's like touching involved and that sort of thing, is yes, you need to focus on what we call the liability, the wrong that happened, right? Which is what everybody's focused on, as you should be. What happened to me and what's the wrong thing they did to me. But they all, a good attorney, that one of the first things they're going to focus on is what's the what's the potential pot of gold at the end of this rainbow? What
Mhm.
is your claim? What's the maximum amount that your claim is worth? And then making a decision about litigation strategy and other kinds of negotiations, based on that. If you're
Right.
looking at a six-figure payout, well, that may be worth fighting over. That may
Mhm.
be worth pushing and taking some time to think about it. If your payout is, $3,000, well, okay, then that sort of resets the stage for you in your negotiations, because you're not going to get them. And how might that happen? If you got wrongfully fired and you turned around, and in particularly in this environment, it's entirely possible you get a job paying the same or more,
Mhm.
then the value of your claim, for most claims, is going to be from the time that you were fired until the time that you got this new
Yeah.
job. And if
Mhm.
we're talking 2 weeks a month, well, it's going to be something, but it's, maybe a pay cycle that we're talking about as kind of the top that you're going to get. Yes, pain and suffering and emotional damages can be part of these claims, but they're very difficult. It just, just because and I don't mean to minimize this, but just because you're upset or your feelings are hurt doesn't mean you're going to get a six-figure emotional distress damages. In fact, it's probably, as emotional distress matter, it's probably dollar figures not worth
Mhm.
anything, which is sort of crude to say, but this is how courts evaluate it. So,
Exactly.
if something really, horrendous has happened to you, which we see, then of course that number can be bigger. But we do see it all the time where we come in and we're like, this was drop dead illegal, and the value of your claim is $1,000 or $5,000, which
Yeah.
is often in some ways good news, because it means that you have replaced that income. So your lost wages just aren't that big. So yes, we could walk into court and we've got the smoking gun email. We could show it and you would win, and the judge would say, write him a check for $3,000. That's a little bit of hyperbole. You can, depending on how bad it is, you could get punitive damages. But these are not things I would bank on, when I'm going through a severance negotiation. So,
Exactly.
another important consideration is, what is your claim actually worth? Whether you're thinking about one of these loans or you're thinking about just what kind of sweat equity you're willing to put into it. It's important to keep your eye on that ball.
Exactly. Yeah. And like you said, sometimes it may not be worth the fight if it's a pay cycle where you now replace that income
Right.
as well. And I'm sure, with a lot of maybe the larger settlements, that kind of brings me to, what do you need to do with that? Now you have kind of a windfall,
Yes.
making sure you protect that, contact your financial advisor on what you need to, how you need to allocate it, what you need to invest in as well, so you can capture those dollars instead of going out and having a big party
Yeah.
with your
Right.
settlement.
Absolutely. Because it does. That's a good point. It does happen that people do get significant recoveries. Six figures or higher. And yeah, there can be, again, just in terms of payout, are they going to, and which tax season they pay it out? I mean, that's why it's also, advisable to get somebody in who, get your CPA involved.
Right.
Because, again, it's just like you said, like winning the lottery, yeah, you might take the payout over time to get that bigger amount, but it may make more sense to take the lesser amount and take it in a lump sum if you can put it in a different investment vehicle. And so the same thing here, it sounds like the same amount of money, but it's not, depending on how it's paid out and how it's
Right.
taxed.
Mhm.
And most people have that aren't professional in this area. Like I don't do tax work, so I know enough to be dangerous, but you want somebody who's up on, somebody like Pamela, who's up on the financial services, and I'm sure you work with CPAs all the time, who can say like, hey, here's the most, because again, for sometimes the company, once the money's been decided on, how they pay it out is not a big, right? They'll be like, okay, you want half of it now and then half of it in the next year. Okay, we'll do that,
Yeah. Yeah. And then
so
it definitely comes down to, I do work with a fair amount of CPAs. That's kind of what we do. I consider myself kind of the quarterback of the team, but
right,
really engaging
right.
services of those that I need, to help the client. But that's what it comes down to. It's like, how are you going to take it? If you're going to take it as an annuity, you're going to take it as a lump sum. When do you take it for, timing purposes? Would be a tax situation. For example, with my client who retired, with the PTO, she had 2 years. How do I take it, over time? Or am I forced to take it all in one tax year? or do I split it up a little bit? Because that can be a pretty big tax bill if you get a lump sum
Yeah,
all of a sudden, just like that. So
that could be a
you really
nasty
need to kind
surprise,
of
right?
figure out, the best situation for you from a timing perspective, but then also how do you take it? Do you annuitize it and just take smaller chunks, or do you take the lump sum? But that really kind of depends on your tax situation, and then really consulting your financial advisor and your tax professional to make sure you come up with the best efficient solution for you.
Great. And on that note, we will wrap this up. Thank you so much. This has
Thank
been
you.
fantastic. A lot of great information here. And just one more time for people that might want to reach out to you, how do they find you?
Yep. Website, of course, www.jacksonsams.com. That's JACKSONSAMS.com. And of course, if people had additional questions for me, it's Pamela@jacksonsams.com is my email. And for people who are on social media want to connect with me there, I'm on LinkedIn under Pamela J. Sams, and then Facebook and Facebook and Instagram under @JacksonSamsWealth would be the handles there.
Yeah, I highly recommend contacting you on social media and then following that. You put some good information out. So it's a good way to stay on top of things.
Mhm.
All right, Pamela. Well, thanks so much again, and then enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
Okay, you too. Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Tom, for
All
having me.
right, bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.